Hello, in this video I'm going to discuss the Saptamsa chart and athletic ability. This is part 5 in a series of videos on Vedic, Vargas, and vibrational charts. You do not need to watch the first four videos in this series because this video also stands by itself. And what we're looking at is areas of life in which the Saptamsa chart gets very strongly expressed. In the previous video in this series, I showed how the Saptamsa chart shows up very important in the relationship of parents to their children and grandchildren. Now we're going to see how the Saptamsa chart shows up in the charts of athletes. Now this may sound peculiar or strange. Why would the same chart show up in seemingly completely different areas of life, like relationships between children and parents, and also in athletes? What do they have to do with each other? I discussed that in some of the previous videos, and the idea is this. The Saptamsa chart gives a very basic, fundamental quality. The quality of slowing down and going within, going deep, of becoming still and deep. A very simple thing I say about the Saptamsa chart is that if you want to understand it, stand on one foot. Just stand up and stand on one foot. When you do that, in order not to fall over, we tend to become still, to not talk a lot. We are focusing inwardly, you might say, sensing what's going on. This quiet, this depth to sense what's going on is the process of the 7 vibration. It's a very fundamental, you might say broad process. It applies to many areas of life. So many things in life require us to settle down and go deep into things, to feel deeply into it, a kind of internalized reality. Very simple. Anytime you just stand on one foot, think of all of the things, sports, things like this. That's why it shows up in these athletes, because what we study are the greatest athletes, the best of the best of the best. And to be a great athlete, you cannot just have natural talent. It requires that focus, that getting inside, practice, discipline. So practice and discipline are some of the symptoms of 7 vibration. We've also found 7 vibration showing up in romantic relationships. So this is a soul connection. Different romantic relationships or marriage relationships are built on different kinds of connections. So the 7 vibration is not always involved in romance, but sometimes it is, because the two people have this kind of inner connection. They just kind of know each other. They like to be alone together. They feel this kind of natural depth of a connectedness. So it can show up in many areas of life. And to just give you a sense of it, I'm going to show you a few examples of these athletes. Now, I have a whole series of videos on the greatest athletes. So I'm just going to summarize some key points here, because I wanted to make this video in the context of the Vedic Vargas to integrate in this information with the whole overall idea of how the Saptamsa chart becomes relevant to seemingly different areas of life. And in the next video, we'll show it shows up, the Saptamsa chart shows up strong in the charts of many spiritual teachers. Why would that be? Because these are teachers who emphasize meditation, going within. Again, that same broad general principle. In some of the higher vibrations, things get more specific. And also it depends on the planets involved. If you have Mars involved with Uranus or Pluto in 7 vibration, excellent for athletics. If you have Moon, Saturn, and Neptune, for example, in 7 vibration, it tends towards meditation. So it depends on the planets, depends on the orbs, depends on life experiences and how the person comes into tune with that energy flow. Okay, so I'm just going to review quickly here because I do discuss this in detail in the video library here at astrologydc.com. There's a button for athletes, and you can click on that and watch all of the videos about the relationship of the 7 vibration chart. 7 vibration chart, of course, is the same as the Saptamsa chart. To athletics, if you want to dive deep into it, just want to summarize some of the key ideas so that you can see the same kinds of things are at work here as we will see, for example, with gurus, but the planets are different. And again, this is an extreme case sampling study where what we did is just went to Google and typed in greatest athletes of all time, found a website of the greatest athletes. That's an extreme sampling, like who's the best of the best. And we study every chart that has AA data that's listed on the website. This removes selection bias, no cherry picking. As soon as you remove selection bias, most things in astrology do not work. If you don't believe me, try it. The astrology works great as long as you are forced to have to use a set of charts based on some criterion. It's amazing how selection bias can be very unconscious. How we tend to ignore what doesn't fit with with what we want to happen. So that's why this research is very compelling, very convincing that something's really working in astrology. Okay, so here is what we have. The super athletes, the ones we listed on the website are people like Michael Jordan, Steffi Graf, Pele, Wayne Gretzky. If you're a fan of sports, you probably recognize these athletes. They're great in different sports. Michael Jordan, basketball, Steffi Graf, tennis, and so on. Okay, now what we find in these athletes is Sun, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are involved, and Uranus and Pluto. Any planet except Moon, Venus, or Neptune is likely to be involved in a combination of 4 planets. Very powerful configurations. So just to give you an idea, on the left we have Michael Jordan. Look at all the planets at 5 degrees. Again, this is a Vedic style chart wheel in the sidereal zodiac with sidereal whole sign. Okay, so I was looking for the Ayan Namsha. I don't see it. Sidereal whole sign. Well, anyway, here's the chart wheel, and what we're seeing is the Saturn and Pluto are conjunct at 5 degrees Sagittarius, square the Sun at 5 degrees Pisces, opposition Mercury at 5 Virgo. Unbelievably tight, all in the same degree, 5 degrees. In fact, this thing spreads less than half a degree, a T-square of Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Pluto. Of the 7 power planets, that's 4 of them. This is what you see over and over and over again. On the right side is Steffi Graf, who's listed among about a dozen of the greatest athletes. I mean, think of all of the athletes in all of the sports for so many decades. These are the greatest of the greatest. And what we see here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planets in the Saptamsa chart. And what do we have? We have We have Sun and Jupiter at 23 Pisces, trine Mars at 24 Cancer, the Sun at 26 Taurus, and that's spreading a little bit more. These are 23, 24. Saturn at 22 Gemini. Pluto at 23 Aquarius. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 7 power planets. All the power planets except, Moon is involved. We don't count the Moon. We have 5. Pluto, Jupiter, Sun, Saturn, Mars. 5 of the power planets plus the Moon added in, aspecting each other. We have look at all the different combinations. Anyway, again, power planets in the same degrees making aspects to each other in the 7 vibration chart. In tennis, by the way, we often see trines and sextiles. In more aggressive sports, you'll tend to see hard aspects. In sports that emphasize fluidity and smoothness, and if the person has a graceful style in that sport, you'll often see trines and sextiles, which is the case with Steffi Graf. So, are we on a wild fishing expedition when people hear these things like, David's claiming that 7 vibration shows up in athletes and all these things? It almost sounds unbelievable, like we're cherry picking data, we're making things up. No, we're not cherry picking data. I've explained that. That's the thing we're not doing. And we also do a statistical analysis, as I've shown with other charts, like with, in our research on rock musicians, etc. We can show these things really exist. Astrology really works. Very, very exciting. So here's Michael Jordan. And this just repeats what I've already shown you. And Steffi Graf, this also repeats what I've shown you. Okay. And I mentioned here the world of the Saptamsa chart is quiet and meditative. From this quiet place, the ability to focus and concentrate is born. And we have this idea in vibrational astrology of what we call overtones. And to understand the idea of overtones, let's go back to, say, this chart of Steffi Graf. What we're saying about overtones is that if planets are conjunct in 7 vibration, for example, Steffi Graf has Moon conjunct Jupiter, they are in 7 vibration. When a planet trines the Moon and Jupiter, like Mars, it's in 7 times 3. It's like a waltz in 7 vibration. That Mars, in relationship to Moon Jupiter, is a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's what we're looking at. Or the Sun, Saturn at 22 Gemini is square the Moon and Jupiter. That's a square. So it's in 7 times 4. 7 times 1/4 of a circle is 28. It's in like a 4/4, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what is happening is you can look at this Saturn squaring the Moon Jupiter as an overtone, as a frequency that's 4 times higher than the basic frequency of the Moon Jupiter. The Mars is 3 times higher. It's the same exact thing that happens when you look at the waveforms that are produced by playing a trumpet or a saxophone or someone's voice or a piano. There are different overtones. So when you hear the note A played on a piano or a clarinet or a guitar, that 440 cycles per second of A is the dominant frequency, but there are overtones. And those overtones enrich, strengthen, and change the tone quality. It's exactly the same in vibrational astrology. these additional aspects, the trine and square, are strengthening, enriching, and changing the tone quality of the basic impact. And they are all important. And when you get at least 3 planets together, it creates a rich, resonant, powerful sound, a strong message, a strong theme, a strong quality in your life. And that's what we're seeing with the athletes. Okay, so we're seeing what we could call overtones simply by looking at the different aspects in the vibration. And here I summarize that in the second paragraph. 7 times 3, which is a trine in the 7 vibration, is a 21 vibration and gives a soft overtone to the Saptamsa chart. A square, on the other hand, also creates an overtone, but it's a more hard, dynamic overtone that it adds to the 7 vibration. Okay, and if you go up to the overtone vibration, so let me go back to Michael Jordan for a second. Here's the Michael Jordan 7 vibration with the T square. We have Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Pluto, plus Neptune, which is not a power planet, but adding one of the additional planets that's not an athletic power planet, Moon, Venus, or Neptune, does add a little more. It helps a little bit. Not as much as a power planet, which is any of the others, which would be Sun, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, or Pluto, but it adds a little more. So he has 4 power planets plus an additional 5th planet in a tight T square. In 7 vibration, this is Michael Jordan. We are not surprised. Now, what happens if we look at the 28 vibration chart? All of the squares will collapse into a conjunction. So let's go forward and look at his 28 vibration. There it is. And there is this Pluto, Mercury, Sun, Saturn, Neptune, all collapsed, those 5 planets, into a conjunction. And then sometimes we'll see additional overtones from other planets, which I don't see in this case. Nothing around 20 to 25 degrees. But anyway, we have the 5 planets within 5 degrees, which is really tight. Extraordinarily powerful pattern for an extraordinarily outstanding athlete. This is what happens when we do this kind of analysis. So, I've done additional research where I compare the birth charts of 2,538 sports champions that were collected by the Gauquilins with 906 singers, and we do these statistical tests, and the statistical tests are significant. So we follow up our observations, our analysis, with a statistical analysis, and it shows that we really are seeing differences that fit our theory, that make perfect sense. Wow, this is so exciting. And we're really understanding what the Saptamsa chart is and why it's been so difficult to pinpoint it. It's a basic fundamental principle showing up in different areas of life where that principle is important. And you have to understand exactly what orbs to use and what relationships to look at. And with the power of the information age, these databases, and the whole history of astrology, it's all coming together and becoming very clear. And we have the statistics, which shows us what the actual probabilities are, things that ancient astrologers could only dream of. It would sound like science fiction fantasy to them. We now have, all of us. We can buy computers and do all this stuff. So what do athletics and children and grandchildren have in common? They seem completely unrelated. I already talked about this. So you can pause this video if you want and read it, but I've already described this. The way that I believe there's like a soul connection of the parent to the child, and a connection that you feel when you're quiet and thoughtful. And even with adopted children, even stepchildren, there's some kind of interconnectedness. I mentioned this in the previous video. The cosmic tapestry is amazing. How all this interconnected weaving of vibrations is happening. It's just awesome. Okay. And here I talk about different ideas about the Saptamsa chart. Point number 3, spiritual and mystical according to modern Western astrologers like John Addy, David Hamblin, Rick Levine. Is that true? Yes, it's true. The Saptamsa chart can incline to spiritual and mystical. Doesn't have to. Not always. Nothing especially spiritual or mystical, as we usually define those terms, with athletics, but it shows up there as well. So we're just getting a deeper, more refined understanding of how things work. And it's interesting to read different literature. It helps. That's where we got the idea of looking at children and grandchildren from the ancient Vedic tradition. Here's a quote from Robert DeWoos in his book Constellational Astrology. The Saptamsa chart often shows the fruition of past karmic accumulation and as such reveals an affinity with nature and the products of the earth. I'm not actually able to incorporate that idea very directly. But anyway, what I'm doing here is being transparent and honest, and also so you don't get confused if you explore ideas on the Saptamsa chart in Vedic astrology and among other harmonic astrologers. You will hear different ideas, and in many cases we've been able to incorporate and understand how that relates. In other cases we are not yet able to do that. So just to be clear about it so you don't get confused about what I'm saying, about where we are in our understanding. Okay, and this is interesting. In the Yavana Jataka, they give an interpretation for every one of the 84 Saptamsa signs. So when you make the Saptamsa chart, there are 7 times 12, 84 signs, and they give a meaning for each one. It's so fascinating. We don't have this idea at all in vibrational astrology. But as an example, the second Saptamsa in Virgo has this interpretation. In the second Saptamsa, referring to second Saptamsa of Virgo, is born a man whose thighs and chest are heavy, whose arms, belly, and shoulders are handsome, whose body is like a good-looking youth's, and whose nose, erect ears, and mouth are beautiful. He is gentle, eloquent, and wise, and his thoughts concentrate on sexual intercourse. Okay, so this is a book written between the 2nd and 7th century, according to different historians, somewhere in that range. Wow, and of course the origin of the ideas is much more ancient, going back over 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years. People have been interpreting the Saptamsa chart, and here they're interpreting it very differently by emphasizing each of the 84 signs. These are things to explore that we haven't yet incorporated into vibrational astrology that are just fascinating. So in this series of videos on comparing Vedic Vargas with vibrational astrology, one of the things I'm sharing with you is that there are some ideas in the ancient Vedic astrology books that are fascinating, potentially very powerful, and so far we have not been able to incorporate them. Is there something about this particular Saptamsa sign? Does each Saptamsa sign have its own quality? It's possible. As much as we learn, as much as we're sure of, does not mean that we shut the door on the possibilities. It appears that astrology is capable of extreme precision beyond what we currently have any ability to do. And all of these different aspects of what's going on could become relevant, could be incorporated. So, again, in this series videos relating Vedic Vargas to vibrational astrology. This is an interesting idea. Again, one that we're not able to incorporate yet, but research could be done on people who have a particular planet in the same Saptamsa sign. This means they're conjunct within a certain orb and within that Saptamsa sign, and see if there's something about the Saptamsa sign that seems in common. Okay, so we're looking at beats, basically rhythms, 7 beats, 9 beats, and from the point of view of Vedic astrology, what we've done in vibrational astrology is we're saying there's an 11 beat, a 13 beat, a 17 beat. We've blown this idea of Vargas, boom, into this idea that there are vibrations, just like there are endless numbers of colors to pick from, all different vibrations. There's this huge number of vibrations. And in the ancient astrology, they had many more than 16 Vargas. And we're saying there are many, many more. So that's the radical difference between vibrational astrology and Vedic astrology as it's known, is that we're saying all of these vibrations are important. And here's the 13 vibration, which we already talked about. And our interpretation of 13 vibration, by the way, is inclined, as I say here at the bottom of the slide, 13 vibration inclines a person to engage in something special, in something that is not mediocre or average. And the 11 vibration, which lead to kind of restless and dynamic moving. These vibrations are very interesting. Let me go back to 13. The 13 vibration, you go through 13 signs in each normal sign, or we call Rasi sign, and then each sign begins with its own sign. Taurus begins with Taurus, Gemini begins with Gemini. It's such a perfect, beautiful rhythm, fascinatingly perfect, that we go right through the zodiac and end up with each sign in its own sign. Something very special and perfect and unique about it, and the 13 vibration does like to stand out from the norm. In the 11 vibration, we get a similar effect, but instead of going forwards, it goes backwards. The 11 vibration is like spinning the wheel backwards. So you go from Aries starts with Aries by definition, and instead of going forward to Taurus, you go backwards to Pisces. And then the next sign of Gemini starts with Aquarius. So we're going backwards, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius. What I'm saying is that each succeeding sign, the Rasi sign, the main sign of the chart, begins with the previous sign in 11 vibration. So 11 and 13 are similar. 13 is like on the beat, in sync with the sign. And the 11 vibration is like spinning backwards. And the 11 vibration is, a little weird, a little unstable, always moving, and very interesting, very progressive, and a little bit rebellious. It just won't go the normal way. So it's interesting. It's fun to explore the interweaving of these things and how they can relate to their meanings. Okay, so I've mentioned this in Vedic astrology. We know that a lot of the ancient texts talk about many more Vargas than the main 16. And is it possible that the great ancient sages and rishis understood more than is in the books handed down to us? Probably yes. Is astrology as we know it now just scratching the surface of what astrology will become, just as mathematics has blossomed since the times of the works of Euclid 2,000 years ago, up to the mathematics of today or any other field? You know my answer. Yes. Yes. My viewpoint is that we are at the beginning of a major explosion, and that astrology will evolve and grow just like other fields have. So I propose that the 11 vibration is very important. It's restless, dynamic, uncompromising, unstable, self-willed. The 13 vibration strives to be involved in something special, strives to go beyond the ordinary and average. So Most people who are here at Astrology DC are not Vedic astrologers coming from a Vedic astrology background. Some of you are. But even if you are not, it's nice to know how to think about vibrational astrology from the point of view, with the eyes of someone trained in Vedic. And so we can think of vibrational astrology from the Vedic perspective as taking the idea of Vargas and exploding it out into this new level and proposing that the Vedic tradition is not suggesting that people should rely on the astrology of 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, that there was some golden perfect age and we must simply go back to that. What I'm suggesting is, yes, we go back to that, to dig up as much as we can and be grateful for it, and then move forward. That there's huge progress to be made. I believe that's what the ancient sages and rishis would hope for. So, in that sense, we can think of vibrational astrology as being in the spirit of Vedic astrology. Okay, and so the final idea, and drum roll and trumpets please, again, in terms of someone who comes from the Vedic tradition, is that there are new Vargas. There are these additional vibrational charts, 11, 13, 77, 91, 5, 35, and actually hundreds of others. And like with different sports, you'll find, for example, 91 vibration, which is 13 times 7. You get the specialness of 13, the inner focus of 7. You get sometimes extreme sports, sports that involve transcendence. Bruce Lee, with his martial arts, also we see this in other areas, such as we'll see with spiritual teachers, which involve a transformation through discipline. Transformation 13 through 7, inner focus, going deep. You see it with things like Bruce Lee with his form of martial arts. You will also see it in our next video on gurus and ideas of inner meditation, things like Kriya Yoga. So, I won't go through all the ones here on this slide, but you get the idea. Well, let me just mention one other, 77 vibration. The speed, restlessness of 11 plus the inner focus, 7 and 11 seem so totally different. What would the restlessness of 11 combined with the quiet inner focus of 77, you get people like racing car drivers, where you're driving the car and you're like in this zone, in this like focused, very focused. You can't be, looking around and things are whizzing by really fast. So you can get this inner connectedness amidst a movement. We see it also with boxers, and also I've recently seen it with musicians who have like an inner meditative, you could call it spiritual, or you see it in Celtic music, different things. So anyway, the combination. So I'm just giving you an idea of the rich tapestry and possibilities of where we're moving astrology to a new level if you think about it from the Vedic astrology point of view. So in our next video, we're going to look at spiritual gurus, and that will be part 6, and that will be our last part, just to complete our discussion here of the different ways that the Saptamsa chart, or in other words, 7 vibration, can get expressed in different areas of life. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.